today we're going to be talking about normalizing difficult topics because why not? Let's have those difficult discussions. As a social worker, they don't bother me, but I know that they can bother some people. So I just kind of say, let's just be open and, hear what people have to say. As always, I encourage you to open up your chat. And we do have a chat storm question that I'll get to. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. And so obviously, welcome to our InSync roundtables. This is our opportunity for support group leaders to kind of have a support group. And we're glad you're here with us today. Now, as you know, we can be a little rowdy. So we do ask that you mute your mic when necessary, but then at the end, we all want everyone to come off mute and share. Listen deeply, really try and be present, silence your phones, I know it's really hard we're so used to multitasking to just listen deeply and be engaged right now. And of course, yes, and not just for improv, for everything. Like, yes, I want to do this, and here's how I'm going to move it forward. So move with intention. And as always, be patient with technology, because while it's great when it works, it doesn't always work. And so now, because as I said, we're going to be talking about normalizing difficult topics, today's chat storms, what Parkinson's symptom bothers you the most? What's just kind of like, I'm getting frustrated with this. Is it the slowing down? Is it the, the tremor? Is it the fatigue? I've heard people say that they hate hitting that wall at 3 p.m. What's bothering you the most? Is it the overactive bladder? Yes, fatigue and leg pain. Thanks for being honest, Ben, VJ, because it's the truth. These are things that people don't like to talk about, and yet they're a fact of what's going on. And I do think leg pain, like I've heard neurologists say that, Parkinson's isn't painful. And I thought, well, it can't feel good to be stiff all the time. So, it can't be okay. So REM sleep disorder, we're actually going to talk about that a little bit because we've had people and they've expressed embarrassment over it because they feel like that's a bedroom thing and we shouldn't be talking about it when it's something a lot of people experience. Bill says the lack of affect on my face, the stone face, really throws people off. That, yeah, they think that you're not engaged, that you're not as interested because you're just kind of like blank, and that can be really difficult. Lauren says, deciding if I would rather shake with tremors or wiggle with dyskinesia. In other words, do I want too much medication or not enough medication? Because I either deal with this or I deal with that. And either way, when I'm kind of moving around, I'm not like as comfortable as I could be. Shabir says, and welcome back, Shabir from India, tremor when holding my spoon eating. Yeah. And then you're sort of like, well, I don't want to make a mess while I'm eating. These are big deals. And this is the kind of stuff that it's like, well, let's talk about it. Let's have that discussion. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. There we go. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about normalizing difficult topics, and we'll do our usual where we do our breakout rooms and everything. So now let's talk about what are some difficult topics. And the big thing is always people want the future. It's like we want to talk about it because we want to feel like we have some sense of control, but that's also kind of scary. We don't want to talk about, wills and living wills and, durable power of attorneys and things like that. We don't want to talk about that. And of course, constipation, because again, that's a bathroom topic, and we don't talk about that. Brain behavior disorder. I remember at a support group, this woman, her husband, she was really uncomfortable, but he was like kind of holding her down. And on the one hand, it was gallant because in chivalrous, because he was like, don't worry, dear, I'll fight the dragon for you. But she's like, he's holding me down. And she was very embarrassed because she almost felt like she was betraying a bedroom secret. And yet everyone was like, yeah, we sleep in separate rooms, or we started doing this. And you could just see how relaxed she became, because it was like, oh, okay, this isn't just my problem. A lot of people have this. And of course, incontinence. And anxiety and depression is a big one, because I think people they treat it like it's a character flaw, as opposed to, and nobody would ever say that. If you look at like physical symptoms, nobody would ever say, well, how come your brain just doesn't make more dopamine? That's not what anybody would say. You would just be like, oh, you've got Parkinson's. And it's kind of like, well, the anxiety and depression, well, you're probably not making enough serotonin either. It's a very chemical depression. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not a character flaw, but people are embarrassed by it. And of course, hallucinations and delusions. These aren't things people like to talk about. And so, again, these are just things that let's normalize them, because they're a part of it. And I'm sure some of you, as I'm going through this, are like, yeah. So now, why is this difficult to talk about? Well, one of the reasons is I've heard people say, well, talking about it makes it real. Like I can kind of just ignore it until I have to talk about it. Or I get upset when I talk or think about it. So I'd rather just kind of be the ostrich with my head in the sand and kind of just pretend it's not happening. It's embarrassing or uncomfortable. Again, nobody wants to talk about constipation or incontinence. These are, things we don't talk about. And of course, I'd rather pretend it isn't happening. The old joke, denial is more than just a river in Egypt. And that happens, and I get it. So I'm going to warn you guys, this next slide, there's going to be some spoilers. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to probably ruin some childhood things, but we spend a lot of time talking about things that aren't real. So talking about something doesn't make it real. And I'm Santa, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, Jack Frost. They're not real, but we still talk about them. In fact, I see all the displays right now that Easter is coming up. I'm very excited by the candy. We talk about this all the time. My daughter used to write letters to the Tooth Fairy, and I was actually very sad when I had to tell her the truth. But again, just talking about something doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it's not real. It's just good to talk about. And then this is actually a quote from my 12th grade AP government teacher. He was actually talking about cruel and unusual punishment, but he said, as if we did it more often, it wouldn't be so unusual. Now, obviously, that's not really what the point of cruel and unusual means, but the point is that, like, hey, if we do it more often, then we're normalizing it. We're taking something and making it usual. So, again, what are we doing? If everyone is dealing with it, why is it so scary? What's so scary about talking about it? And also, like, what is the worst that's going to happen if we talk about it? So part of the reason I did the slide that I did is I was just trying to be funny. Like, let's get rid of some of these irrational thoughts, and let's come up with some different analogies for dealing with this. Because it is kind of irrational to be like, well, it's only real if we talk about it. No, that's not really true. And then also I want to go into some analogies about, how we can discuss things. And so a big thing is we do prepare for so many things. Like, why wouldn't we prepare, for example, for the future? Because I know that's a big deal. It's like people don't want to talk about, well, will I need a facility one day? In my flying solo group, this is something we actually talk about a lot, because it's a little bit more like, I know I have limited support and I have to be aware of this. But for most of non-flying solo folks, it's like, we don't want to talk about this. But here's the thing. Think about everything you have prepared for in your life. Like before you had children, you probably looked for a pediatrician. You had to buy all this stuff, car seats, cribs, you name it. It's just, we have a lot of stuff that comes with kids, finding the preschools, You probably bought a home in a good school district. You did all of these things for these children, and yet why wouldn't you plan for your own future? Before we make large purchases, we don't just go and buy a car, we do research. I mean, nobody really walks onto a car lot and does this. I mean, think about how much we prepare for things. Before I do this, like, I don't, PowerPoint doesn't make itself. Like, I have to do this PowerPoint before this meeting every week, projects, presentations for work. We prepare for them. Callissa's in charge of our CPDC program. She doesn't just throw it together when she gets into a meeting and kind of just goes off the fly. She's prepared for this. Moving, one of the most stressful things in life. Again, we're prepared. We pre-pack everything. We don't just kind of wait for the movers to show up and say, have at it, guys. Like, that's not what we do. Even special occasions and holidays. Yeah, it's fun, but we're still thinking about all these things we need to do. Like, I need to clean, we need to cook, we need to pick up those cookies that such and such likes, and we need to do this. All of this preparation, doctor's appointments, again, writing down what you want to talk about. So it seems kind of silly that we wouldn't talk about preparation for the future, for example. Preparation for all of these things that is going to come and life is going to throw at us. And of course, the big thing is that where else are you going to get the tips to deal with these things? So for example, when people talk about the constipation, apparently there's some tea that people use that's really good. There's the squatty potty. The nurse practitioner I used to work with, she would say, Miralax does not have to be, she called it the constipation carousel, that she would say you would take something because you were constipated, and then that would just let everything go. So then you were taking something else to stop it. And so what she would often advise people is, hey, don't take the full dose of Miralax, but, maybe take half a dose and see if that kind of keeps you regular. And again, these are just things. There's, again, in support groups, people talked about flaxseed muffins, and we're giving out recipes. Separate bedrooms for REM behavior disorder or medication. Again, the big thing is also sleep. People don't want to talk about sleep. Well, let's talk about the sleep hygiene and what we can do. We want to keep these things normal so that people will talk about it, because this is the only way they're going to learn. And it's going to be, there's kind of a comfort in hearing, again, oh, I make these muffins and they really help me. And it's like, oh yeah, so most people with Parkinson's have constipation. This is nothing to be embarrassed about or whatnot. Have the conversation. Let's normalize it. And so now, as always, we do our support group. So what have you done to make the uncomfortable comfortable? That's kind of a big deal. Like, what are you doing in your support groups to kind of say, like, hey, we can have these conversations and it's okay. We welcome them. It's not about making someone uncomfortable or whatnot. This is just kind of something, we're playing the hand we're dealt, and we're going to have fun doing it. So now we're going to, I'm getting the thumbs up from Roger, which is always good. Now we're going to go into our breakout groups. And I just want you to think about, what are you doing in your group to make the uncomfortable comfortable? Or what do you wish you guys could discuss in your group that you feel like, well, people don't really want to talk about this. And so, but I wish we could. I wish we were more open about this, because these are good things to talk about. And so now Kelly's going to move you into your support groups. You're going to have a good 50 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about everything. Welcome back, everyone.
Being recorded.
Being recorded again. Welcome back. Glad you stayed with us. Going to go into room 1. That was Dave, that was BJ, that was Helena, that was Karen Williams, and that was Shabir. What did you guys talk about?
All right. So we introduced each other around the room, and then we said, what are difficult topics and how do you make it comfortable? And Kathy said that, they have a library table with sets of articles on different topics. And she notices that the constipation information moves the fastest. So that's
Pun
kind of a,
intended.
yes, absolutely. So that's a way you can share information on a topic without embarrassing people. Um, and then Karen spoke up. They're about to have a huge symposium, and she talked about adding artistic performance to um, their symposium for the first time.
Mhm.
But she mentioned to have speakers that address the topics and then have the Q&A afterwards. And if the speaker's engaging, then uh, it'll open it up and people will feel comfortable. Um, Bernard Coley was in our group, and he's been dealing a lot with the race and African American community, and people are afraid to offend others or step over certain boundaries that life has placed in our way. And so he says they just started a website. I said, if there's one place that people can go to see what you're up to and how you're dealing with that, he said SIG, which is a support group um, designation, SIG Black Diaspora, or DIASPERA. And so they just had a big symposium and covered a lot of topics that are hard to talk about in the African American community. Um, he also mentioned that making a safe zone is important, and just about everyone added that if you make it a brave, safe space for people to be able to share, and they're confident that the information won't leave the area, uh, they'll be more confident to speak up. Um, he brought up that sometimes timing isn't right. So people may not want to talk about something because they're not ready to. So be ready to respect that. Don't force people to talk about something. They may be dealing with their diagnosis and not ready to talk about individual symptoms. And then I talked about how you could have a one-on-one breakout sessions or set up a mentor type structure where people can have the ability to speak one-on-one with people. And so they may not want to speak out in front of a group, but they'll be more open to speak about, to someone their age, their gender, who's had Parkinson's 10 years. And they may say, okay, what am I looking forward to? Um, Katie talked also about establishing rapport. And she said sometimes there's a mental health aspect that kind of keeps people um, from engaging, either whether it's the holidays, the winter blues, or just simply the longevity of having the disease. So sometimes those may inhibit sharing. Gail said having presenters about on non-motor symptoms, and one was a palliative care expert. It opened up and people were comfortable speaking after that. Shabir um, spoke about, apathy and depression being hallmarks of Parkinson's. It's hard to get people involved and connected. Uh, Motivation is, you can motivate all you want, but it may not make people move. And he's afraid that if you share, pardon me, if you share dark topics, it may discourage someone who just showed up from showing up again. So you want to make sure that you express things in a positive light, even though you're discussing something dark. And that way, it won't be such a hammer hitting people on the head. Um, Helena and I discussed back and forth about creating a social space with no expectations. In her area, it's a pickleball uh, area where people go and play, and then while they're waiting their turn, they interact with one another. And so I pointed out that we're going to have the YMCA started a grant, and we added the element of ping pong and pickleball with no competition or tournament, just free space for people to engage with no expectation. And then I came up with an idea about why don't you have a drop box of doom, like a suggestion box, and people can drop in the things that they don't want to bring up in public,
Mhm.
and they could drop it in there, and you can make it green with fangs and all that. And then once a meeting, you could draw one of the slips out and you could have a conversation about it, and you don't have to say who submitted the question. Um, Helena also mentioned about the sometimes just changing a word will engage more people. So instead of calling something an exercise, call it an activity, and that way more people will say, "Oh well, that's interactive. It's not, exercise. I think of pain and sweat and doing it by myself, and but activity is an inclusive thing." And then Dave Rivera popped in, which we're glad, and he talked about how his group went to a new location. His big thing is to build rapport among the group, and he said one of the way he does that, he has everyone stand up and turn to their left and introduce themselves to the person on their left and have a 5-minute discussion about whatever's important at the moment. And he said the last time he did that, someone spoke up about their DBS, and it sparked a discussion that lasted the rest of the meeting. So sometimes you just have to diffuse the gap between people. And then we talked about the size of the group maybe having issues. If you have a large group, it's really hard for people to engage individually. So Karen talked about how they have one large educational meeting, but then the rest of the month they break out into 3 smaller support group meetings and 2 smaller people with Parkinson's support group meeting. And that way it's more intimate, and it's more of a chance to speak up. One thing that Dave Rivera did bring up, which was very interesting, a website called Census, like the census you do every 10 years, censusreporter.org. You can put in any zip code or county and get all the statistics of your geographical area. And then you can apply, the estimations of 6 people per 1,000 having Parkinson's. And you can really have the statistics of what the need is in your area, and that'll help you determine how best to reach out to people. So censusreporter.org.
I just put that in the chat. Thank you, Group One. I actually really like the suggestion of
The
having
box
the,
of
the
doom.
box of doom, yeah. Because I do feel like most of the time, again, you're probably not the only person thinking it or wondering it or wanting to discuss it. But then also I'm big on reframing because, sometimes it's sort of like, okay, if you don't want to scare someone off, and because one thing we always say, the support group is never a pity party, but it is a chance to kind of get real and to say, hey, sometimes this sucks. And, I'm dealing with it, and I'm sure I'm not the only person dealing with it. Like I usually joke about anxiety that, like, oh, I don't worry about tomorrow because there's still time for so many things to go wrong today. And, it's just, but that's kind of how I deal with it, is that I kind of have to make the joke. But yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that I'm very anxious. But
Yeah, and
let's
the other thing that was brought up is that stressing the point to the group that if you meet one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's, and not everything we talk about is something you're going to experience, but you need to be knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing Group One. And now Group Two, we have Bill, we have Dwight, we have Joanne, we have Joanne Ruby, we have Lauren, and we've got Roger, who'd like to come off mute and share. Hey,
I'm going to
Lauren.
do it today, Eden. So we first started off talking about how any group can be a support group, whether it's a boxing group, a golf group, a coffee group, any group can be a support group. But we did talk about how sometimes specific groups make it more comfortable to talk about this, difficult to talk about topics like maybe a women's group versus a man's group, to talk about hormone issues or urinary issues, sexual dysfunction, all those topics that people might feel more comfortable discussing just among men or women. I mentioned that we have said before, if there's a topic you want to talk about, or if you have a question and you don't want to ask it, send it to one of the leaders in advance, or pull us aside and let us know what it is, and we'll bring it up to the group. And not tell us, and make that person anonymous, because like Eden just said, someone else is going to have that question also. So that's one way to do it. But I kind of like that box of doom. We might have to do that. Oh, we talked about the support group leader training cards that you get when you do the PMD Alliance support group leader training to give you ideas for topics to bring up if you're stuck for something. One question we had, Eden, is we were talking about the All In Summit. Are any of those sessions online? Were they recorded at all?
Unfortunately not. Usually we just it's a budgetary thing usually that we just don't do it. And so I'm sorry because I know not everyone can go
That's
to
okay. It was
Austin.
just a question. And then Bill asked a really good question. We didn't have any really good answers for this, so I thought I'd throw it out to the group. If you have someone who brings up a topic like Lewy body dementia, something very, very serious like that, PSP, MSA, those things, they're really scary and can be a meeting stopper. No one knows what to say. Sometimes people with those conditions might talk about it a lot or go really deep into some dark stuff. And what do you do with that? How do you handle that? So that's, I don't know if anyone in the group has any suggestions. I thought maybe seeing if there's a specific group, probably online, because I don't really know of any, because they're so rare, any groups that are meeting in person, but so they could get together with other people who have those conditions because they might understand a little bit better. But that's a tough topic. And I think that was about it.
Well, I know you, and I know you always would make everybody feel welcome. So I know that you're not going to be like, well, there's the door, because
No, I wouldn't do
that
that.
doesn't happen. And BJ, were you going to say something?
Yeah, generally I do a church group as well, and sometimes uncomfortable things will be shared during the church group. And so I say, or something that's off topic, and I'll just say, look, I'd really like to delve into that. Can you get with me afterwards? And maybe next session, we can give you like 5 minutes and you can speak about, what's going through your brain and things like that. And that way you can acknowledge the person. You can give them a platform to speak if they wish, but you're not derailing whatever you're talking about at the moment.
One thing I also do encourage is, again, the active listening to what someone is saying. We had a situation in a support group once. I was not leading the group, and a person, what he said was that if things ended tomorrow, he would be okay with that. And it was taken that like he is suicidal. And I'm like, that's not what he's saying. And I did reach out to the gentleman afterwards, and I came into the support group and I reached out. And all he really did mean was like, I'm okay. Like, I'm not happy right now. I'm not planning to kill myself. I have no plans to kill myself. I am not suicidal. But if it ended tomorrow, I would be okay with that. And so sometimes it is like somebody with MSA is just kind of, the medications don't work for me. And so I never have relief. And it's just kind of like, I'm not, again, not trying to bring everyone down, but just like, this is kind of frustrating for me because, again, this isn't a pity party. And so when people have a lot of hope and like, hey, there's this medication or I can do this, and they're like, I don't have that. That's a very hard pill to swallow, that it's like, I don't have some of the relief that other people do. And again, I'm not trying to crash everybody's party, but I feel like you guys would understand better than the average person what it's like to have these symptoms all the time and never have the relief. And so, but I do agree that it is sort of like, again, you don't want it to kind of go down a rabbit hole that you were not planning on going down, but just, what is this person saying? Because sometimes it's kind of like nobody wants to listen to me, but I know you guys will listen, and I know you will understand better than the average person. And, again, I'm not trying to hopefully not hijack the whole meeting, but I just kind of wanted to say that, this is what's going on with me.
Eden, we did bring up in our group, the suicide type thing a little bit. So if you're concerned about somebody, at what point do we not be as concerned about their privacy and go to a care partner or go to a doctor, call their doctor or something like that as a support group leader? What would you say?
You'd want to talk to them afterwards and, say, hey, you kind of said these things. A big thing I want to know is, does someone have a plan? That's really, to me, if someone said, yes, I would do this and I have thought about this, and that to me is, there's intent there. There is a difference between I'm good with dying, but I have no intention of speeding it up. I have no intention of bringing it about, and kind of saying, well, actually, Lauren, I've really thought about this. I've been stockpiling pills, or I brought something that I could just inhale carbon monoxide in my garage, or I'm going to do this. Like it's kind of like, if you start telling me you have a plan, that's when I'm kind of like, okay, in my case, I would Baker Act somebody. I kind of have to take this seriously, but it really is. And also, what is making you happy? Because like at the end of the day, most of us do have some things that it's like, well, this still brings me joy. Even when things are not going well, this still brings me joy. And when somebody looks at you and they're just like, I can't think of a damn thing, that's kind of a sign, if you will, that things are not going correctly. So
let me add, I had a lady really express that she was very, very unhappy. I found out that there's a national suicide line that you can refer people to immediately. I was able to get her to see a mental counselor within 3 days. I called her that night. I told her I was getting her help. Sometimes you just got to jump through the extra hoop, get somebody over a bad situation.
Yeah, I think it's, if you call 998, I think that's the national number. You can get a mental health worker on the line ASAP.
Yeah.
But it can be a fine line, because I think, we're supposed to be keeping things in confidence. And if they are okay, and they're just, like Eden was saying, if they're just saying like, I'm okay with, with whatever's going to happen in my life, but they're not going to do anything about it, and you take it wrong and you call the spouse, or whatever, you do definitely take the risk at losing their trust.
I called her at home and talked to her before, and I gave her the reference, and she reached out to the counselor on her own. But it was important that she didn't feel like nobody was paying attention to her. But I did it on a one-on-one setting over the phone rather than in front of the whole group.
Oh, yeah. I think that's important.
Jay, what were you going to say?
So I never take on a responsibility without having someone with more experience so that I can turn to. So if you are leading a group and you don't have someone you can turn to, talk to somebody that's here today, and have someone you can go to in confidence and say, I'm having this happen at my meeting. And that's really why we get together every month, is to support each other. So if you mesh with somebody that's here today and you want to have it kind of like an accountability person that you can bounce things off of in confidence. That's how we handle the church groups. If someone speaks up about a divorce coming or something like that, we have permission to talk to the pastor about that. And but I would say that always have someone to have your back, and that way you have someone to turn to ask these types of questions.
Thank you though for speaking up, because again, this is normal. This happens. And again, we make some of these things very taboo, like, oh, suicide. And I'm not saying it should be a normal topic, but it happens. And we should be able to talk about it. Sorry, my dog's going a little crazy right now. We're going to finish with room 3 with Blake, Craig, Deborah, Judy, and Kai.
My dog is barking with your dog. He heard your dog barking and he's barking away. Oh, hey, sex. We talked about how difficult it is to talk about intimacy and how different ways maybe to let that happen, like separating the men and the women or the care partners from the person with Parkinson's. One of the suggestions I thought was really good was, and I think it was from Blake. I don't see, did he leave us? Oh, no, there you are. He talked about doing things like they did in schools with children, have everybody put their head down on a table and they mentioned a problem and you raise your hand and they can, you know, check, okay, 3 people said they have this problem or without anybody knowing who's doing it. So I thought that was kind of a cute little exercise. Also, we did talk about Blake. I want to say his name here shows golf therapy, and he described his golf therapy program, and it's a lot like what we do with Rocksteady Boxing. Sounds like he's got a really good idea. I think he's going to get together with Deborah, I believe it was, who lives not too far from him, and maybe talk to her group and help show them what his plan is. Anyway, he should, maybe we should hear more about him. And Billy, if you want to cut in, because I'm doing a terrible job describing you, if you want to cut in and explain it a little bit more.
Sure. And I'll try and keep it brief. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're kind of.
So I am starting a new program that is involving golf. It's similar to the Rocksteady Boxing. So I've been a practicing therapist for the past 6 years, and I have been working at a Parkinson's-based gym. And whenever I do my occupational profile, I get to know the patient's hobbies because I like to incorporate the hobbies into my sessions. And there's been a common theme. Most of them used to play golf, and emphasis on the used to. So what I've been doing over the past year and a half is I've been bringing equipment in and been trialing this new program where they can actually practice this golf swing in the local gym. And I use the golf as a means to address the common symptoms of Parkinson's, such as rigidity, poor balance, confidence is a big issue. And what I've done is I will take a video like beforehand of their swing and addressing that rigidity. It's very small. And then through the therapeutic interventions that I use to amplify their movements, maximize their movements, it's been really successful in having them actually see their progress. So it provides that objective visual cue where they see the immediate outcome when they can hit the ball harder, they can hit the ball further. And I break every little aspect down of a golf swing, all the way from putting the ball onto a tee to feeling more confident, getting the ball out of the hole, transferring in and out of a golf cart. And then with that, we've been having like really fun sessions. So I've actually gathered enough equipment where I can bring the equipment to people's homes if they do not feel confident going to a driving range or going out to play golf or anything like that. And I'm not making them a better golfer by any means. I can't do that to myself. But I can use my therapeutic background to address the symptoms, what I see they're struggling with. And then I use golf to help address those symptoms. And I make the sessions fun and enjoyable. And then it's such a timeless game that there's social aspect to it, getting outside. Sometimes we just like talking about the good old days of this one course they played with their family, things like that. So there's so many different aspects to golf that can really be beneficial to the population of people with PMD.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm interested to hear from Deborah after you speak to her group.
Yeah.
One of the other things we talked about, which wasn't exactly on topic, which happens a lot here, is how to deflect from people who are taking over a meeting for whatever reason. They don't stop talking or they're interrupting everybody, or they're on a tangent for a certain problem or something. And we talked about different ways to, kind of get the meeting back on track. And I did mention that we've had one of these events here discuss that particular topic. Maybe they get some more information from there. And I think pretty everything else, and just to shorten this all, everything else that we talked about was pretty similar to what you've already heard. So I won't repeat everything.
Well, I'm glad you guys had such great discussions today and kind of, again, kept it real. We are going to close now because we're a little over time. Just a reminder, everyone who registered will get an email now telling them where to find this link to rewatch this program if they would like to. And we thank you all for coming and sharing with us today and just being support group leaders. Thanks, everyone.